Before we go any further, I want to first, on behalf of Alyssa and Alyssa's family, express our deepest sympathies to Elizabeth Olten's family, Ms. Price, her brother Anthony, and her father Dale. They've gone through a terrible, terrible tragedy, something we never wish on anyone. That said, the issue facing the judge now is what punishment to impose on the 15-year-old Alyssa. And that's what we're facing. That's where the case is at now.
And you mentioned kind of looking ahead at with sentencing, you plan on bringing witnesses in that courtroom on February 6th, right?
I anticipate that both the state and the defense will be presenting witnesses at the sentencing hearing.
And did you talk with Alyssa about this plea hearing? I mean, we heard her in court today saying she understood what she was pleading guilty to. I guess how long has this been in the works, too? I'm not sure I follow your question. Are you asking whether we ever talked to our client? No, I'm saying, with your conversations with her, was it something that you first brought to her? Was it something she asked about? I guess just kind of walk us through the steps of how this came to be her pleading guilty today.
Those aren't steps I can discuss at this time.
Why was this a good deal for your client, though? The judge asked you if you thought it was, you said it was. Why would this be a better deal than going to trial and trying to get her exonerated by a jury?
If this case had been tried to a jury, first of all, the state would have to prove its case, and if they were able to make a submissible case, and if they were able to submit their case to a jury, and then the case would have become, is it murder first degree or murder second degree or manslaughter? And I think this is the appropriate charge. This is the charge that Alyssa took responsibility for. It's the right charge. And I think after you hear the evidence at the sentencing hearing, you'll also agree that murder second degree is the appropriate charge.
Explain to us, in 25 words or less, the difference between what murder 1 would have meant and what murder 2, what she pleads guilty to, means.
And do you mind looking this way while you do it? Bob doesn't have a camera. We appreciate it.
Murder in the first degree and murder in the second degree both have a requirement of knowing that the defendant knew what she was doing, and the difference being murder in the first degree has the added element of deliberation or coolly reflecting upon the matter. That's the difference between the two. Except for on sentencing, the difference between the two, murder in the first degree, maximum punishment is life imprisonment without eligibility for parole. That's the only punishment. In the second degree, there is a range of punishment.
Do you consider the judge's decision last summer to suppress statements made by your client at the time of her arrest significant in A, the reduction of the charge, and B, your decision to accept an open plea?
That's something you probably need to ask Mr. Richardson.
And kind of explain what this open plea, this blind plea that she made today, what that is exactly.
Well, it's kind of I'm not sure the term really fits that well. It's not really, it's a term commonly used when there is no agreement as to punishment. But it's not, this is not an agreement that was gone into blind. Alyssa took responsibility for the charge of murder in the second degree. There's nothing blind about that. She pled guilty to that charge. The only issue is, what is the punishment? And the state will be arguing for their suggested sentence, and we'll argue for our suggested sentence. And it's up to the judge, and I recognize it's going to be a very difficult decision for the judge to decide what is the appropriate punishment for a 15-year-old girl under the circumstances of this case, under the circumstances of who she is. And we believe that what we hope to be able to do at the sentencing hearing is to show Judge Joyce a more complete picture of who Alyssa Bustamante is. Right now, all the public knows is the girl in the green jail jumpsuit and the Facebook pictures. That's all the public knows about her. She's a much more complex person, just like any of us are. We are not just who we are when we see on the Facebook page or on occasional news snippets. And we want the jury to be able to see, and we want Judge Joyce to be able to see a full picture as to who Alyssa Bustamante is.
And how many, you mentioned some of the witnesses, how many do you plan on calling? Can you give us some hints as to who that might be, people from her past?
We'll be preparing a list of witnesses we'll probably have it in a couple weeks. I know that the court asked for a list of witnesses. We'll probably get it to the court within a couple weeks. I think the state indicated they have a half dozen. We may have a little more than that. And it's going to be a variety of witnesses concerning a number of issues surrounding Alyssa. And we just have to figure out who to call. We'll make a list of who to call, who would be the most efficient way and the appropriate way for this court and the judge to learn as much about Alyssa Bustamante as possible.
How has this case been? I mean, working, has it been a tougher case that you've had, you know, out of all your years of practicing? You've been in it for 2 years now. Just kind of explain that.
There are no easy cases.
In this one in particular, anything that stands?
It's always very challenging and daunting to have the life of a 15-year-old girl in your hands, to have to fight for her to have a chance for freedom at some time in her life. And all cases we handle are daunting and challenging.
The Department of Corrections had indicated early on that they weren't really prepared to handle someone of Alyssa's age in their adult institutions system. Is the fact that she's about to turn 18 later this month more than a coincidence to the timing of this hearing and this decision?
No, I wouldn't say it's a coincidence, and it's a sad commentary that there are a large number of 17-year-olds in the Missouri Department of Corrections. I think when that comment was made by the Missouri Department of Corrections, she was then 15 years old. Sad that she's aged in jail. It's a fact of life that happens to juveniles around the state. And the fact that it's happening, you know, this case is resolved today, it's a combination of more factors than I could even fathom to list for you right now.
There were a number of hearings over the last 2.5 years relative to her access to educational services while in jail, access to items which might be evidence at trial. Were you attempting to establish precedent with the treatment of defendants of this age? And if so, has the law changed, do you believe, or will it change as a result of the hearings that you've had relative to this case?
We weren't looking to set precedent. We were looking out for the interests of Alyssa Bustamante. We were looking out for her best interest. That's all.
Normally you guys do death penalty cases. Can you tell us why this particular case wound up in the hands of the capital unit even though the death penalty legally never was on the table?
This is kind of a unique situation. We came into this case as an assist to the local office because at the time Ms. Bustamante's case came up, at that moment in time, our caseload was down, the local office's caseload was skyrocketing, and this being a complex case, we stepped in as an assist.